Nathaniel Cross is 28 years old when he makes the decision that will change everything. Standing in his small apartment in Portland, Oregon at 2 in the morning, holding a lit candle with hands that won't stop shaking. The crescent moon mark on his right palm has defined his entire life since it appeared on his 13th birthday. A pale silver marking approximately 1 inch long, positioned in the center of his palm with the points facing toward his fingers, glowing faintly in darkness in ways that no medical examination has ever adequately explained. 15 years of being treated as chosen, blessed, marked by God for purposes that religious communities speculated about endlessly, while Nathaniel just wanted to be normal, to be valued for who he is rather than for the inexplicable sign he carries. The mark brought attention Nathaniel never wanted. His Pentecostal church declaring him a prophet before he'd even finished puberty. His parents treating him with reverent distance rather than normal parental affection. His peers viewing him with mixture of awe and suspicion that prevented genuine friendship. Every achievement was attributed to divine favor rather than his own effort. Every failure was scrutinized for spiritual significance rather than accepted as normal human imperfection. The mark made Nathaniel into symbol rather than person, vessel for other people's religious expectations rather than individual with his own desires and identity. He tried accepting the mark's significance during his late teens and early 20s, attempted to fulfill whatever prophetic role his church community insisted he was destined for. Nathaniel studied theology, led prayer groups, delivered sermons that people praised as divinely inspired, even when he knew they were just competent public speaking born from practice and preparation. But the prophetic calling never felt genuine. He experienced no divine revelations, heard no voice of God, received no supernatural guidance beyond the mark itself and the faint dreams that sometimes accompanied it. Dreams showing suffering and conflict that Nathaniel had no context to interpret or ability to prevent. By his mid-20s, Nathaniel's faith had eroded to exhausted agnosticism. He couldn't deny that the mark was real and unexplainable through conventional means, couldn't dismiss the historical patterns suggesting marked individuals appeared during periods of catastrophic change and had roles in shaping outcomes. But he also couldn't accept that being marked meant surrendering his autonomy to divine plan he didn't understand or agree to. That carrying unexplained symbol on his palm obligated him to live according to expectations established by people who claimed to speak for God, but who seemed primarily interested in controlling him. If you're watching this video, drop a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. Nathaniel left his Pentecostal community 3 years ago, moved to Portland where nobody knew about the mark or the religious baggage it carried. He found work as software developer, built quiet life focused on career and casual relationships that didn't require explaining his complicated history with faith and prophecy. He wore gloves or kept his right hand in his pocket when the mark's faint glow might be visible. Avoided situations where people might notice and ask questions he was tired of answering. The strategy worked for maintaining privacy and normalcy, but it also meant living in constant awareness of the mark, never truly forgetting what he carried, even when successfully hiding it from others. The dreams intensified over the past 6 months, becoming vivid enough to wake Nathaniel gasping, their content disturbing in ways his earlier dreams never were. He sees cities burning, millions of people suffering from plagues and famines, conflicts escalating into wars that consume entire nations. He sees marked individuals throughout history facing terrible choices, moments when their decisions determined whether catastrophes unfolded or were somehow prevented through sacrifices Nathaniel doesn't fully understand. Most disturbingly, he sees himself in these visions, older and marked by scars, standing at threshold of something that looks like battle, but feels spiritual rather than physical, facing choice between acting or fleeing that will determine outcomes affecting millions. The visions suggest that whatever the mark represents, It's connected to events approaching in Nathaniel's near future. That the choice he's been avoiding, about whether to accept or reject his supposed calling, is becoming urgent rather than theoretical. But Nathaniel doesn't want the responsibility these visions imply, doesn't believe he's capable of the heroism or sacrifice they seem to demand. Doesn't trust that the mark represents genuine divine calling rather than just biological anomaly that religious communities have built mythology around for purposes serving their institutional interests rather than any actual divine plan. So Nathaniel decides to end it. Not his life, but his marking. The symbol that's defined him since adolescence and that continues generating expectations he won't fulfill. If the mark disappears, if he can destroy it through physical means, then perhaps the visions will stop. The sense of destiny and obligation will fade, and he can finally live the normal existence he's craved since the mark first appeared and transformed him from regular teenager into religious community's chosen vessel. The method Nathaniel chooses is crude but symbolically appropriate. Burning away the marked skin with open flame, enduring whatever pain is necessary to eliminate the sign that's caused him 15 years of unwanted attention and impossible expectations. He researches the process online, understands that severe burns can destroy skin tissue completely, that careful application of flame over time can eliminate markings more effectively than single intense exposure. The pain will be extraordinary. The healing will take months. The scarring will be permanent. But scars are preferable to the mark's continued presence. Physical pain more tolerable than the psychological weight of carrying symbol of destiny he's determined to reject. Nathaniel positions himself in his bathroom where tile floors and lack of flammable materials minimize fire risk. The candle held steady in his left hand, while his marked right palm extends toward the flame. He's planned this moment for weeks, gathering courage to inflict serious injury on himself for purpose most people would consider insane. But Nathaniel's desperation has overcome his survival instincts. He believes destroying the mark is necessary for his freedom, that enduring temporary agony is worth permanent liberation from expectations and visions that have consumed his life for 15 years. He lowers his marked palm toward the candle flame, feeling the heat intensifying as his skin approaches the fire, his body screaming warnings that he's about to cause serious harm. Nathaniel pushes through the fear, pressing his palm directly against the flame. The pain immediate and overwhelming in ways his research didn't adequately prepare him for. He holds his hand steady despite every instinct demanding he pull away, counting seconds that feel like hours, determined to maintain contact long enough for the flame to destroy the marked tissue. But instead of the mark burning away, as Nathaniel expected, something impossible happens. The crescent moon symbol begins glowing, not the faint luminescence it usually shows in darkness, but brilliant silver light that intensifies until looking at it directly becomes painful. The glow spreads from the mark across Nathaniel's entire palm, the pain of the burn transforming into sensation that's neither pleasant nor purely agonizing, but entirely unlike anything he's experienced before. The candle flame is drawn toward the mark as though the light is consuming the fire, rather than the fire consuming his skin, the normal physics of burning flesh somehow suspended or reversed. Nathaniel tries to pull his hand away, but discovers he can't move it. Not because he's physically restrained, but because his will to move has been overridden by something else. Some force operating through the mark that's taken control of his autonomy. The terror this generates is absolute. Nathaniel is trapped inside his own body, unable to control his actions, watching helplessly as the mark grows brighter and the sensation spreads up his arm toward his chest and head. The bathroom's overhead light flickers and dies, the only illumination coming from the glowing mark and from new light source that's appearing above Nathaniel. a circle of pale silver radiance forming on the ceiling directly over where he stands, approximately 3 feet in diameter, its edges sharp and defined as though something is cutting through reality itself to create, opening into space that shouldn't exist. The circle expands slowly, its light intensifying, revealing that it's not merely illumination, but actual portal, window into somewhere else that Nathaniel's bathroom ceiling is becoming gateway to. Nathaniel stops struggling against the paralysis holding him, his attention completely captured by the impossible thing appearing above him. Through the circular opening, he sees space that defies description. It's not merely room or landscape, but dimension where normal rules about distance and physics don't seem to apply. The space glows with the same pale silver light as his mark, containing structures or beings, or something that Nathaniel's mind interprets as vaguely humanoid figures, though they're composed of light rather than flesh. Their forms shifting and indistinct in ways that make sustained observation difficult. A voice emerges from the portal. Not sound traveling through air, but communication that happens directly inside Nathaniel's mind, bypassing his ears entirely and speaking to him with authority and presence that makes ignoring it impossible. The voice calls his name. Not Nathaniel, but something else. A designation or title that he somehow understands refers to him even though he's never heard it before and doesn't know what it means. The voice tells him that his attempt to destroy the mark has triggered response that was always going to happen eventually. That his rejection of the calling has delayed but not prevented this moment. That choice he's been avoiding must now be made because circumstances are converging that require his decision. Nathaniel tries to speak, to ask what's happening and what the voice wants from him. But his paralysis extends to his vocal cords. He can't produce sound, can only listen and watch as the portal continues expanding and the figures within it become more defined and numerous. There are dozens of them, all composed of shifting silver light, all arranged in formation that suggests military organization rather than random gathering. They're watching Nathaniel with attention that feels evaluative, as though they're assessing whether he's adequate for whatever purpose they represent. The voice continues explaining, or rather showing, because the communication shifts from words to visions that appear directly in Nathaniel's mind. Images more vivid than memory or imagination, experiences that feel like living through events that haven't happened yet. He sees war unfolding. Not conventional conflict with armies and weapons, but spiritual battle where the stakes are human souls and the battlefield is reality itself. He sees marked individuals throughout history participating in this eternal conflict, their choices determining whether evil advances or is held back, whether suffering increases or is somehow mitigated through sacrifices that cost them everything. The visions flooding Nathaniel's mind are overwhelming in their clarity, each more detailed than any dream, more real than memory. He sees marked individuals across centuries. A woman in ancient Babylon standing before an invading army, her glowing palm raised, creating a barrier soldiers cannot cross. A boy in medieval China during Mongol invasions, his mark burning as he enters a burning building to save trapped children, his death somehow preventing larger massacre that would have consumed the entire village. Each vision shows the same pattern, marked individual facing impossible choice between self-preservation and sacrifice, between living safely and acting to prevent catastrophe. Those who chose to act paid enormous prices. Their lives, their sanity, their relationships, everything sacrificed to prevent outcomes that would have been catastrophically worse. Those who refused survived initially, but watched helplessly as disasters they could have prevented unfolded, their guilt destroying them more completely than physical death would have. Nathaniel sees his own future in multiple branching possibilities. In one timeline, he pulls away from the candle, refuses the calling, continues his quiet Portland life. But this future shows consequences. Within 2 years, a pandemic kills hundreds of millions. Wars escalate into nuclear exchanges. Climate collapse accelerates beyond mitigation. Nathaniel watches from safety as civilization fragments, his mark growing darker and colder. Constant reminder that he could have prevented this. In another timeline, Nathaniel accepts, crosses the portal, joins the luminous figures in spiritual warfare. This future is terrifying. He sees himself wounded and exhausted, bearing scars from battles that aren't physical but leave real damage, his life consumed by conflict that never ends. But this timeline also shows outcomes his participation enables. The pandemic is contained. Diplomatic interventions prevent nuclear war. Coordinated action addresses climate collapse. Billions live who would have died. Their existence purchased through his sacrifice of normal life. The visions reveal the mechanism behind these outcomes. Marked individuals aren't merely prophets. They're anchors connecting spiritual dimension to physical reality, conduits through which divine intervention can operate without violating free will. When marked individuals choose to act, their decisions create permission for spiritual forces to intervene in ways otherwise impossible. Their sacrifices serving as payment, balancing some cosmic ledger governing how dimensions interact. Nathaniel sees other marked individuals alive now, scattered worldwide, most unaware of their mark's significance or actively hiding them, as he has been. The vision shows what happens if too many refuse their callings. Spiritual barriers normally preventing catastrophic outcomes weaken. Malevolent forces usually constrained gain freedom to act directly. Probability of civilization-ending disasters increases exponentially. The current moment is critical because multiple catastrophic threats are converging. Pandemic diseases, nuclear proliferation, climate collapse, technological developments that could destroy or save humanity. The marked individuals of Nathaniel's generation are being called because their combined participation is necessary to navigate these crises. Their choices determining whether humanity survives the next decade or experiences collapse requiring centuries to recover from. The voice speaks again. Nathaniel's attempt to destroy the mark triggered this portal because such attempts represent rejection so complete that intervention becomes necessary. He must be given full understanding so he can make informed choice, or the mark must be transferred to someone else if his refusal is absolute. The portal represents his final opportunity before it's offered to another who might be less suitable but willing. The luminous figures become more defined, their formation creating pathway Nathaniel could cross. The voice explains that crossing means accepting permanent transformation. He would retain physical form but become something more, capable of perceiving and participating in spiritual warfare normally invisible to human awareness. The transformation is irreversible and consuming, requiring surrender of normal life, dedicating remaining years to conflict that won't end until either he dies or humanity navigates through crisis. But acceptance provides access to spiritual dimensions resources, ability to see threats normal humans can't perceive, understand connections between seemingly random events, act with knowledge, making interventions far more effective. They're not superheroes with magical powers, but informed actors with intelligence and assistance, changing their success probability dramatically. The cost is explicit. Accepting means watching loved ones suffer because he can't prevent every tragedy, carrying guilt about those he fails to save while preventing larger catastrophes, enduring physical and psychological damage accumulating across years. Marked individuals who survive into old age are invariably scarred and damaged. Maintained only by sense of purpose and knowledge, their sacrifice enabled millions' survival. The voice asks directly, knowing everything, understanding both terrible cost and catastrophic consequences of refusal, will he accept and cross the threshold? Or will he reject absolutely, accept the mark's transfer to someone else? Live knowing his choice prioritized personal comfort over collective survival during humanity's most critical moment. The paralysis releases. Nathaniel can move, can step back and blow out the candle and watch the gateway close, can continue his normal Portland life. The choice is genuinely his. The system doesn't force marked individuals to serve, offers freedom to refuse, even when refusal has catastrophic consequences. Nathaniel looks at his glowing palm, the mark that's defined and trapped him since adolescence. He thinks about his comfortable apartment, well-paying job, relationships with people who don't know his complicated history. He thinks about freedom to be nobody special, to live and die without carrying weight of billions depending on his choices. But he also thinks about the visions. Pandemic killing hundreds of millions, nuclear fires consuming cities, climate collapse triggering famines, fragmenting civilization. He thinks about marked individuals throughout history who faced similar choices, about those who accepted and paid terrible prices, about those who refused and watched catastrophes unfold they could have prevented. He thinks about the children in the refused timeline, their lives ending in suffering his choice to prioritize comfort would allow. The portal waits. Luminous figures arranged in formation, pathway clear. The voice remains silent. The choice is complete, the decision entirely his. His heart races, mind cycling through justifications for refusal and arguments for acceptance. The most important decision requiring answer in moments rather than years he wishes he could have. Nathaniel stands motionless, the portal pulsing with patient luminescence, neither advancing nor retreating, simply waiting. The bathroom feels simultaneously too small and impossibly vast. Mundane tiles contrasting with the supernatural gateway, normal and impossible coexisting in ways that make him question whether this is genuine divine intervention or psychological break from religious trauma. But the mark continues glowing undeniably, heat radiating from it, sensation distinct and real. The luminous figures shift slightly, their patience suggesting they've waded through countless similar moments with other marked individuals across millennia. That Nathaniel's hesitation is neither surprising nor particularly significant in eternal scope. Nathaniel tries imagining acceptance in practical terms. He'll quit his job. Software development seems trivial compared to preventing civilization collapse. He'll leave Portland, abandon his apartment and anonymity. The relationships he's building will end because he can't explain where he's going or what he's doing. The isolation will be profound and permanent, separated from normal human community by knowledge and experiences that can't be shared, by trauma that can't be explained to people who don't understand what spiritual warfare costs. But he remembers the faces from the visions. Children dying in pandemic, civilians burning in nuclear fires, refugees starving as climate collapses. Those aren't abstractions, but actual people whose lives depend on whether marked individuals accept their callings. Rejecting the calling means accepting their deaths as prices he's willing to pay to avoid discomfort. The moral calculus is brutal. His comfort versus millions of lives, his freedom versus humanity's survival, his desire to be normal versus his unique capacity to prevent catastrophes. What kind of monster prioritizes personal comfort over preventing genocide-scale suffering? But he also knows martyrs rarely acknowledge how much they sacrifice, how much they secretly resent burdens they're celebrated for bearing. The voice speaks. The choice must be made now. The portal cannot remain open indefinitely. Either cross the threshold and accept your calling, or step back and watch it close. Choose. Nathaniel looks around his bathroom. Toothbrush, shower curtain, mirror reflecting his terrified face, all mundane details of normal life he's built. This is what he's surrendering. Not just possessions, but the fundamental possibility of being ordinary, of living without billions depending on his choices. But he recognizes this life is already contaminated by the mark and his knowledge. The dreams won't stop if he refuses. They'll intensify, showing consequences of his rejection, forcing him to witness every death his choice allowed. The mark won't disappear. It'll remain, reminder of destiny rejected, growing darker as refused future becomes reality. There's no escape in refusal. Refusing means living as coward who chose comfort over courage, watching from safety as everything burns, carrying guilt that will destroy him more completely than accepting ever could. The choice isn't between sacrifice and comfort, but between different types of suffering. clean pain of accepted duty versus corrosive agony of moral failure. Nathaniel makes his decision through sudden clarity. He cannot live with himself if he rejects this. Cannot bear knowing he allowed preventable catastrophes because he was too afraid. Cannot become someone who values his comfort above millions of lives. Cannot watch the world burn carrying knowledge he could have prevented it. The acceptance isn't noble. It's barely even choice in the sense of wanting it. It's surrender to moral reality, making refusal impossible despite all his fears. Nathaniel doesn't want to be marked, doesn't want spiritual warfare, doesn't want to sacrifice his comfortable life. But he wants even less to be someone who refuses, when refusing means allowing mass suffering he could prevent. Nathaniel steps forward, his foot touching solid light, his weight supported by the portal's surface. Reality shifts, his perspective expanding to include dimensions his senses can't normally process. Awareness extending into spaces parallel to reality, but separated by barriers most never perceive. The luminous figures surround him, their forms more distinct now, their nature revealed as something between angels and soldiers, beings defending humanity from spiritual threats. They communicate directly. Nathaniel has chosen and cannot reverse it, has accepted transformation that will consume his remaining years, has joined warfare that won't end until either he dies or humanity navigates through crisis. The mark erupts with searing pain, the crescent moon spreading across his skin like living silver, tendrils extending up his arm and across his chest, marking him completely. The new markings burn like brands, each representing connection to spiritual dimension, each carrying information about threats, resources, and the cosmic ledger governing how marked individuals' choices enable intervention. Nathaniel sees the convergent crises clearly now. Pandemic emerging within 18 months. Nuclear exchange possible within 3 years. Climate tipping points within a decade. He sees marked individuals positioned worldwide who've accepted their callings. The network maintaining spiritual barriers, preventing worse outcomes. Constant battles fought in dimensions most humans never perceive. He also sees gaps. Marked individuals who refused, leaving positions unmanned and barriers weakened, vulnerabilities malevolent, forces actively exploit. Nathaniel's acceptance fills one gap, strengthening defenses but revealing how precarious humanity's position is. The figures begin training immediately. Nathaniel must learn to perceive spiritual threats, understand symbols indicating where intervention is needed, coordinate with other marked individuals fighting same battles elsewhere. Learning happens through direct knowledge transfer, but requires his active participation. The training reveals marked individuals don't prevent catastrophes through supernatural powers. They operate as informed actors with expanded perception, seeing connections normal humans miss, acting at critical moments when small interventions produce disproportionately large effects. A conversation with a specific researcher might accelerate vaccine development by months. A warning to the right diplomat could prevent nuclear miscalculation. Testimony before legislators might tip votes toward climate policies. Their sacrifices enable spiritual resources to amplify their actions. The researcher experiences divinely inspired insight. The diplomat receives warning through dream. Legislators encounter evidence appearing through coordinated intervention. The system preserves free will. Direct miracles are prohibited except under extraordinary circumstances. But subtle influences enhancing human capabilities are permitted when marked individuals accept costs. The figures show his first assignment. Dr. Sarah Chen, virologist in Seattle studying coronavirus variants. In the refused timeline, her research is defunded, warnings ignored until too late. Nathaniel must ensure her research continues, her warnings reach decision-makers with authority to act. He'll attend a conference, ask specific questions triggering insights, arrange introduction to philanthropists who could fund her work. But the figures cannot tell him exactly what to say. Intervention must be his genuine choice or it violates rules. They show information and outcomes, enhance perception, but cannot control behavior. Nathaniel must operate autonomously, free will preserved, while expanded awareness makes interventions far more effective. Nathaniel asks what happens to him personally. The figures don't hide truth. Most marked individuals survive 5 to 15 years before dying from accumulated damage. He'll probably die before 40, death appearing natural, but actually resulting from spiritual combat. His family will mourn without understanding what he accomplished. His name won't be remembered because victories will look like fortunate coincidences. The prognosis is devastating, but not surprising. Nathaniel has perhaps a decade remaining. Will spend it in warfare, leaving him progressively damaged and isolated. Will die young and unmourned, except by few who understand. The figures offer no comfort. This is the price, has always been the price. The marked serve because they cannot live with themselves if they refuse, not for rewards or recognition. The portal begins contracting, training concluding, reality reasserting as Nathaniel prepares to return. The figures explain he cannot remain in spiritual dimension permanently. He must live primarily in physical world, maintaining cover while using expanded perception to identify intervention points. The portal will open when needed, but most work happens in mundane reality through actions appearing unremarkable to observers. Nathaniel feels himself pulled backward, bathroom materializing around him, portal shrinking to pinpoint before disappearing. He's standing where he was, candle still burning though significantly shorter, suggesting time in spiritual dimension doesn't correspond to physical time's passage. The mark has returned to faint glow, no longer spreading. But Nathaniel feels the difference. Constant awareness of spiritual dimension overlaying reality. Knowledge of threats and opportunities he couldn't perceive before. He sees his bathroom differently now, noticing spiritual residue from the portal, sensing barriers separating dimensions most move through without knowing they exist. Nathaniel looks in the mirror, searching for visible evidence of transformation. He appears unchanged, same face, same body, but his eyes show something different, depth or awareness that wasn't there before. The look marked individuals carry when they've accepted their callings. It's the expression in historical photographs of prophets and martyrs, particular exhaustion from knowing too much and bearing responsibilities normal humans don't carry. He has conference in Seattle in 3 weeks, where Dr. Chen presents. Research to complete about her work and the philanthropist he needs to connect her with. New life to build around his calling while maintaining appearance of normality his cover requires. The software job becomes instrument of real work. Portland apartment becomes base of operations. Entire existence reorganized around preventing catastrophes only he can perceive approaching. Nathaniel blows out the candle, bathroom returning to darkness except faint glow from his palm. He attempted to destroy this mark with fire, to burn away destiny and claim normal life. Instead, he opened portals showing exactly what his mark meant and what refusing would cost. Given full understanding, Nathaniel made the only decision he could live with. Accepting terrible burden because refusing meant allowing preventable suffering, making his comfort seem obscenely trivial. The portal is closed, but not gone. It exists permanently in spiritual dimension, waiting to open when work requires communication or resources. He's crossed threshold that cannot be uncrossed, transformed into something between human and divine instrument, dedicated to warfare consuming his remaining years and probably costing his life before 40. But Nathaniel carries knowledge making sacrifice bearable. Pandemic will be prevented or contained, nuclear exchange avoided, climate collapse addressed. Billions will live who would have died, never knowing how close they came to annihilation, never recognizing marked individuals who sacrificed normal lives to enable humanity's survival. Over the following months, Nathaniel's life transforms completely while appearing superficially unchanged. He continues software development work, but his real focus is the assignments the luminous figures provide through dreams and the occasional portal openings. The Seattle conference goes exactly as planned. His question to Dr. Chen triggers the insight leading her to breakthrough research approach. The introduction to philanthropist Jonathan Webb results in funding ensuring her work continues when government grants would have been cut. 6 months later, Dr. Chen's research leads to early identification of novel coronavirus mutation, her warnings reaching CDC officials who implement containment protocols, preventing what would have been catastrophic spread. The pandemic that killed hundreds of millions in the refused timeline is reduced to contained outbreak affecting thousands. The averted catastrophe invisible to everyone except Nathaniel and the other marked individuals who coordinated to make the prevention possible. But the victory costs Nathaniel dearly. The spiritual combat surrounding the pandemic intervention leaves him with chronic pain that doctors can't diagnose, nightmares that destroy his sleep, psychological damage accumulating as predicted. He looks older than his 29 years, moves like someone carrying invisible injuries, speaks with the carefully measured words of someone who's seen too much suffering. His personal relationships collapse as friends and acquaintances find him increasingly difficult to be around. His intensity and barely concealed damage making normal social interaction exhausting for everyone involved. The isolation the luminous figures warned about settles over Nathaniel like permanent shadow. The knowledge of what he's preventing and what it costs, creating barrier between him and normal humanity that cannot be bridged through conventional connection. But Nathaniel also discovers unexpected grace notes in his new existence. The other marked individuals he coordinates with become his true community. People who understand what he's sacrificing and why, who share the peculiar exhaustion of serving as conduits, preventing catastrophes that will never be recognized. Their meetings, sometimes physical, more often spiritual through portal communications, provide validation and support that makes the isolation bearable. And there are moments of pure joy when interventions succeed, when disasters are prevented and lives are saved. When Nathaniel sees outcomes his sacrifice enabled. A child who would have died in pandemic outbreak, laughing in playground. Unaware that her survival was purchased through marked individuals' willingness to accept damage that normal humans couldn't endure. A city that would have burned in nuclear fire continuing its normal existence. Millions of people living and loving and building futures that the refused timeline would have erased. These moments don't balance the ledger or make the sacrifice feel worthwhile in simple transactional sense, but they provide meaning that sustains Nathaniel through the isolation and pain and accumulating damage. He's not happy in conventional sense. Happiness requires peace and security and normal relationships that marked individuals sacrifice. But he has purpose and knowledge that his suffering matters, that the decades he won't live enable billions of others to reach the decades they'll experience. 3 years after accepting his calling, Nathaniel receives assignment that he knows will probably kill him. A diplomatic crisis is escalating toward nuclear exchange. Marked individuals positioned throughout the world working desperately to prevent the catastrophe. But the spiritual opposition is overwhelming and the barriers are failing. Nathaniel must travel to a specific location at a specific time, must speak specific words to a specific person, must serve as anchor allowing divine intervention of unusual intensity to prevent the unthinkable. The luminous figures are honest. The intervention will almost certainly kill him. The amount of spiritual energy being channeled through him will damage him beyond his body's capacity to heal. The opposition will target him specifically. His survival probability is less than 5%. But without his participation, the nuclear exchange becomes highly probable, the deaths numbering in hundreds of millions. The civilization collapse following the exchange, potentially ending organized human society for generations. Nathaniel doesn't hesitate. He accepts the assignment, makes arrangements for what little he owns to be donated after his death, writes letters to his estranged family, explaining nothing because they wouldn't believe the truth. He travels to the location, a UN building in Geneva where emergency negotiations are happening, and waits for the moment when his intervention will be needed. The moment arrives during a crucial meeting between nuclear powers, tensions at breaking point, miscalculation about to trigger launch sequences that will end civilization. Nathaniel speaks to a translator who's about to mistranslate a crucial phrase, correcting the error before it compounds into catastrophe. The correction seems trivial. Single word changed. but it prevents misunderstanding that would have been interpreted as threat, breaking the escalation spiral and allowing diplomacy to continue. The spiritual energy channeled through Nathaniel during this moment is devastating. He collapses immediately, his body unable to sustain the intensity, damage too severe for recovery. He's rushed to hospital where doctors work frantically but futilely to save him, unable to identify or treat injuries that exist primarily in spiritual dimension. Nathaniel dies hours after the intervention, his last conscious thought being gratitude that the sacrifice purchased humanity's survival, that the nuclear fires didn't fall, that billions will live who would have died. He's 31 years old, has been marked for 18 years and actively serving for 3. His entire adult life consumed by calling. He accepted because refusing was morally impossible, despite the terrible cost. The funeral is small. His family attends despite not understanding what he'd become or what he'd sacrificed. Few of the marked individuals he worked with able to attend without revealing themselves. The obituary lists him as software developer who died of sudden illness. His actual accomplishments and sacrifices invisible to everyone, except those who operate in spiritual dimensions most humans never perceive. But in spiritual dimension, the luminous figures honor him as he deserves. Warrior who fought well, who accepted impossible burden without complaint, who gave everything so billions of others could continue living. His name is added to the eternal record of marked individuals who chose sacrifice over comfort, whose deaths enabled humanity's survival during crisis moments when collapse seemed inevitable. The chosen one tried to extinguish the crescent moon from his hand with fire, discovering that attempting to destroy divine calling doesn't eliminate it, but forces confrontation with its true meaning. The celestial portal that opened showed Nathaniel both catastrophic consequences of refusal and terrible cost of acceptance. Standing at that threshold with complete knowledge, Nathaniel chose enabling others' survival over preserving his own, chose to be instrument of prevention rather than witness to catastrophe. The portal sealed his fate, committing him to path-ending and early death, but also enabling interventions preventing civilization-ending disasters. Nathaniel Cross accepted his calling not from desire to be hero, but because understanding what refusal cost made acceptance the only choice he could live with and die for, knowing his suffering served purposes larger than any individual's comfort or survival.